Today we're going to focus on something called developers. Thank you, Alex Torres, for giving me some kind of topic to focus on. It's been a great productive day putting this little mini class together for you. So I hope it gives you information that will give you a little freedom behind the chair to make you feel a little fearless, creative, and full of knowledge. So here we go on developers. Okay, let's talk about what is actually in these volumes of developer. There's two main things as stylists that we need to be concerned about in terms of what's in here. There's a lot of stuff in here, but for us, all we need to know is there's two things that we have to focus on. So in these stars right here, they represent my 10, 20, 30, and 40 volume. And what you'll notice is in each jar, there's two color liquids. One's the green color liquid, and then the other one is yellow. So the green color liquid, what that represents is how much water or conditioning agents are in that volume of developer. So it's water / conditioning agents / thickeners. That's what the green represents. The yellow represents how much hydrogen peroxide is in each volume of developer. So hydrogen peroxide, you guys remember that, right? That is hydrogen peroxide. So that is what the yellow represents. So let me do this. Does that look more familiar to you? Water. So water with an extra oxygen. That's all that hydrogen peroxide is. It's water with an extra oxygen. So what's so important about the extra oxygen? Let me circle it for you. I call this little guy hydrogen peroxide's superpower, because when hydrogen peroxide releases that extra oxygen, it goes to work and does the job. So that right there is the superpower of hydrogen peroxide. Now that we know what's inside our developer, our hydrogen peroxide and our water / thickener conditioning agents, how does developer affect hair? Where does it sit on the pH scale? Because we know pH affects hair. That's the one thing that hair responds to. So let's take a peek. So here's our handy dandy pH scale. Hair sits about a 4.5 to a 5.5. I think a lot of us remember that from hair school. And developer sits on the acidic side. It's about 3 to a 3.5. I know that's a surprise to some people. It's acidic, and it's more acidic than hair. So how that affects hair, anything that's more acidic than hair will constrict it or tighten it and make it close. We say close, but really it's tightening it. Anything that's higher on the pH scale than hair, it will soften it and swell it. That includes water. It includes even your acidic demi, which is about a 6 to a 7. That will even swell hair. So just remember, anything more acidic than hair will tighten and squeeze. So sometimes I know some of us have been confused in the past, thinking that developer is what swells the hair in a hair color process. But that's not chemically possible. It's acidic. It will tighten and squeeze. So how does our developer release that secret weapon, that extra oxygen? How does it do that? And then what happens when it does? So in order to release that extra oxygen, it's not happening while it's sitting in the bottle. Even if you open the bottle, it does not get released. It's just hanging out, waiting. The only thing that will release that is if it gets added to an alkaline. Because remember, we just talked about this is acidic, right? The developer is acidic. Anytime you mix an acid with an alkaline, you have a reaction. That reaction is a release of the secret weapon. So if I mix my developer with a lightener, that lightener is what triggers this guy to release it. Or if I mix this with a permanent color, that permanent color is the guy that tells this developer, okay, release that secret weapon and go to town, do your job, whatever. We'll talk about that in a minute on what it's actually doing, but it's releasing that oxygen as soon as they mix. So the cool part about it is whenever like lightener or permanent color gets that oxygen released into it, it's then considered oxidized. I'm sure we've heard that before, right? And so because it's oxidized, oxygen is being put into it by the developer. That's why we call the developer an oxidizing agent. Pretty cool. Good to know, right? Okay, we turn these guys around because now we're going to talk a little bit about our oxidizing agent and the difference between the volumes. I'm sure we have a general idea, of course, on the difference, but let's talk about the nitty-gritty so you have a solid foundation of what the difference is between the volumes. So here's the difference. If I look at a 10 volume developer, what you'll notice is my water conditioning agents is really high and my amount of hydrogen peroxide is really low. So at a 10 volume, 3%, I know sometimes you hear 3%, for 10 volume, especially in European countries, they don't necessarily do 10 volume, they do percent. So 10 volume is also considered 3%. That means that there's 3% hydrogen peroxide available in a 10 volume, and 97% is water conditioning agents. Good to know. 20 volume is also considered 6%. So that would be 6% hydrogen peroxide and then 94% water conditioning agents. Then we go to 30 volume. 30 volume, 9%. So same thing, 9%, and then what is that? 91% water. And then all the way to 40 volume. Now the 40 volume goes up to 12%. So it's 12% of hydrogen peroxide and then 88% water conditioning agents. So what could that look like when that oxygen gets released in the different volumes? So how I kind of view it in my brain is a 10 volume will have a gentle, slow sizzle, right? Then a 20 volume will have a little bit of a stronger sizzle. 30 volume would be like a boil, right? And then 40 volume is like the overboil. Do you ever boil pasta water and you're like, oh my God, it's an overboil, it's going over the pot. Crap, I gotta turn the stove off. Like in my mind, that's a 40 volume. So when it releases, that's the strength or the energy, some people like to say, the energy that gets released at the different volumes of developer. So it's the same ingredients, it's just a different concentration of each or a different ratio. That's the difference between the volumes of developer. So I don't know about you, but I love a visual. So let's see it in action.